This is Creating Your Encore Career and Becoming a Silver Entrepreneur with your host, Lynn Freest. Lynn will share ideas and expert advice from people that are walking in your shoes and living their encore careers, where they want and at the pace they want. You'll start a company of one with confidence and knowledge to live a fulfilled life of freedom and ease. Lynn is a coach and leadership consultant whose mission is to show senior leaders and experts how to start something refreshing and new after a full career in the corporate environment.
Welcome to this episode of the podcast, Creating Your Encore Career and Becoming a Silver Entrepreneur. This is titled, You Need to Change Why You Are Smart in an Encore Career. So, making the leap from being a corporate leader and expert into becoming a solopreneur can be daunting, but the rewards are great. You can work when you want, where you want, and you can do the work you love. And I can be a guide and a thinking partner to help you do that. As your coach, I will help you go farther and faster based on what I've learned from being on this journey for several years. So, if you're even having thoughts about starting an encore career, please contact me and take my clarity quiz that's available on the website. So here we are in this episode, You Need to Change Why You Are Smart in an Encore Career. And this comes from a recent book as well as an article and a podcast I just listened to by Arthur C. Brooks. And his book is entitled From Strength to Strength, Finding Success, Happiness, and Deep Purpose in the Second Half of Life. And also, kind of summarizing the book is an earlier article, an Atlantic article he did, where he talked about your professional decline is coming much sooner than you think. So, I want to share the insights there. I thought they're useful. Again, they are a person's opinion, although he's got some studies and other information to back him up. But again, it's a perspective that I think is interesting. And he talks a little about a very interesting distinction on how we are smart early in life versus smart later in life. And I first got hooked up to this idea when I heard Arthur Brooks do an interview with Chip Connolly of the Modern Elder Academy. And Chip Connolly was featured in my last podcast. So Arthur C. Brooks is an American social scientist. He's a professor at Harvard, and he's also been past president of the American Enterprise Institute. He writes a popular How to Build a Life column on The Atlantic, and he also is the host of a podcast called The Art of Happiness. So many of us, as we go forward, assume that the more successful we are, the less susceptible we are to becoming irrelevant later in life. And that, these things that happen to others won't happen to us. But in truth, the greater our achievements are in our early life and our attachment to them, the more we notice it when we're just not performing quite the way we know we used to. And it can become very painful for people, especially high achievers, when that happens. So what can we do starting now to make our future years a time of happiness, purpose, and even success? Again, Arthur Brooks, in his personal story, starts out, he says, in his 20s and earlier than that, he wanted to become the world's greatest French horn player. But as he actually got into his 20s, he found himself not getting better, but getting worse. And so he finally said, well, I got to do something different. He then went to university, became a social scientist and a professor, but he also wanted to really study how intellectual performance changes over time. So in his career at the age of 50, he embarked on a 7-year journey to discover this and work on it and find the people that had also studied it. So his new book, From Strength to Strength, is a result of that study and also provides a practical roadmap for the rest of your life. So he's drawing on social science, philosophy, biographies, theology, as well as many interviews with everyday men and women in a wide variety of settings. And so what he found was that in many professions, whether it be sports or intellectual professions, the raw physical skills and the thinking skills decline. In physical sports, often, in the late 30s and certainly into 40s, and even in the thinking skill professions, they declined at about 50. And he brought it up an interesting contrast as he makes this position. He said, poets, they're usually had their most creative periods before about the age of 40 or 50. Most of their most creative work as a poet is before that. Now, he said, in contrast to that, historians often do some of their best work in their 60s. So he said, why is that? What is that? And he said, also, entrepreneurs, while there are successful people in the entrepreneurial world who are more senior, just like Chip Connolly with Airbnb, The actual innovative ideas and stuff are often done before people are 50 in most cases. Now, in one particular case where it's, literally they've written it into policy is air traffic controllers. They have a mandatory retirement at age 56, and it's basically for safety reasons. They have to hold so much information. They have to have a lot of critical thinking skills. They have to really be able to, at the top of their cognitive game as they're doing their air traffic control work. So the difference that Arthur Brooks proposes is the difference between what he calls fluid intelligence and crystallized intelligence. And just a rough description of it, fluid intelligence is the ability to reason, analyze, and solve novel problems. It's really your raw intellectual horsepower and the speed with which you can do things. Now, contrasting that is crystallized intelligence is the ability to use knowledge gained in the past. It's that vast library and understanding of our experiences. And also, Arthur Brooks calls it the essence of wisdom. And that type of intelligence tends to increase through one's 40s and does not diminish until very late in life. Again, going back to the idea of the poet and the historian. The poet is trying to think up novel ways to put words together and tell a story, all those kinds of things. Whereas the historian is working from a body of knowledge, putting it together, discerning patterns, doing all kinds of things like that. So they're different. And another one is professors, and that's what Arthur Brooks, is also. The most admired professors, they are senior in their years. They've seen a lot of things. They can explain to people how things work, how things fit together. One of the things in his book, he says, interestingly, this would suggest that new professors should be doing the research and senior professors should be doing the teaching. And that's kind of the opposite of the way the universities are probably set up. And then there's just the trap of this fluid intelligence. And I mentioned that earlier. It's kind of a thing that once we have it, we want to hold on to it. But as we're growing older and again, we're getting this transition to what we call crystallized intelligence, that's the kind of thing that as silver entrepreneurs or as Encore careers, you probably need to think about that because you may have already noticed that as your career was going on, there's a lot of people that are smarter and faster, those kinds of things, but a lot of things. So you just have to keep that in mind. And you have to reimagine how you're keeping score. Again, if you were doing achievement, getting the raw numbers every month, those kinds of things, if you're really achievement oriented, you have to think about how am I going to shift that to where I'm going to, measure not just achievements, but contributions. How do you measure wisdom? That's not an easy thing. And one of the things he said, the people that are, especially the leaders and stuff that are high achievers, what they really fear as they go into the second part of life or their Encore career is they fear the loss of relevance in the second half of life. So could we redefine what relevant means? I won't be the data nerd or whatever like that, probably for a variety of reasons, but can I redefine what relevance is? And so I would propose, and some of this comes from the book and other things I've found, is the value of crystallized intelligence, the value that you can provide in an Encore career, is you have a wider and deeper body of knowledge to draw from. Often people haven't seen as much as you've seen. You can also be the holder of organizational wisdom. They recommend that, we don't retire all the people who have some years left in them, but, these are the people that actually hold the organizational wisdom. And then we can help new employees with what Arthur Brooks calls their peripheral vision. Often, again, these people who are high achievers, they're very focused, they do great stuff, but again, they can create the .com crash, they can create the Enron thing, they can create the financial crisis with all their complex financial instruments. They don't see the other stuff. They also don't see the broader patterns or even understand the bigger system. They tend to have a tunnel vision. They're very good at what they do, but they don't have that broader perspective sometimes. Again, and as people with wisdom and senior people, we can probably ask better questions. I always remember talking to a guy when I was working. He says, I could hire all kinds of data scientists. He says, we can get all kinds of processing power in today's world, but I need to have better questions so that when we turn these people loose, we're trying to solve more important questions than maybe what first came to mind for someone. And then the last piece of it is, and I think that this might even be the most important, is you have experience working with people. Again, your crystallized knowledge is all the things you've worked with people over the years, the things that have gone well, gone not so well, whatever it may be. They offer an example. Procter & Gamble for many years has had what they called a master society. So they went out and kind of looked, who are the people that everyone else goes to ask a question of? They'd actually did some research to say, okay, asking people, well, who do you go to when you need some insights or how things work around here? And those are the people they'd fold into their corporate mastery society. Again, then when this interview with Chip Conley and Arthur Brooks happened, Chip Conley suggested, he said that there should be at least one 70-year-old person on the leadership team and or on the board of directors. Somebody that can sit there and really be able to look back across the arc of history, you might say, or the breadth of the business, and that could really say, hey, wait a minute, have you guys thought of this yet? So that, again, is just a quick summary I wanted to share with you. I encourage you to get Arthur Brooks' book, From Strength to Strength, Finding Success, Happiness, and Deep Purpose in the Second Half of Life, and read his article from The Atlantic, and there is a link to that in the show notes. So just to wrap up, the trap of achievement is that, your fluid intelligence is at its peak probably between 25, 30, and 40. But you need to be thinking about transitioning into a role where you can use your crystallized intelligence, which can serve you well from 60 to 80. So those are the things you could at least consider as you start working on an Encore career. And what I always remember is the title of Marshall Goldsmith's book, which is not really on this subject, but the title is What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And I think that's very true as we start looking at our Encore careers. Remember, with an Encore career, the rewards are great. You can work when you want, where you want, and do the work you love. And as your coach, I can help you go farther and faster based on what I've learned from being on this journey for several years. You now have the time, attention, and money to make this leap, so let me help you. And if you're having any thoughts about starting an Encore career, please contact me. Again, all the resources will be in the show notes, and I encourage you to leave a review or even just reply if you have a question or something that interests you in this podcast. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.